In 1965, General Motors banned any engine over 400 cubic inches from its pony cars. 4 years later, 50 Camaros left the factory with an all-aluminum 427 engine never meant for the street. One dealer exploited an internal ordering loophole to force General Motors' hand. At $7,000 each, they sat unsold, while corporate spent years trying to buy everyone back. How that mistake became a million-dollar legend starts with one policy memo. On June 1st, 1965, a memo from General Motors' Engine Standards Committee landed on the desks of every divisional manager. John H. Stuck, the committee's chair, and GM President James M. Roche signed their names to a new rule. No midsize car, including the Chevrolet Camaro, could be built with an engine larger than 400 cubic inches. The language in the memo was clear. Liability and public image were at stake. GM's legal counsel warned that any car described as high performance could expose the company to lawsuits if drivers crashed. At the same time, insurance companies were raising premiums on powerful cars, threatening sales across the board. The policy was not just a suggestion, it was codified in GM Engineering Design Standard 340D and reinforced in a dealer circular, GM D245, sent out in July 1966. The circular instructed every salesperson to strictly enforce the 400 cube ceiling, making it a non-negotiable part of the sales process. Leonard J. Nestor, the chief parts officer, added a new layer to the restriction. The Central Office Production Order System, the COPO channel, received a software update. Any order for a Camaro, Nova, or similar platform with a 427 cubic inch engine or larger would be automatically rejected. Even if a local dealer tried to request a bigger engine, the system flagged the order and demanded a signed waiver from a regional manager, outlining the risks and accepting full responsibility. William H. McCluskey, head of GM's legal department, drafted the waiver to leave no doubt. Any exception would have to be justified, documented, and approved at the highest level. In the eyes of GM's leadership, this was the firewall against unwanted headlines and legal exposure. The rule was absolute, at least that's how it appeared on paper. Inside Chevrolet's engineering labs, the ZL1 engine took shape as a weapon for the racetrack, not the showroom. Born from the demands of Can-Am racing, the ZL1's heart was an all-aluminum 427 cubic inch V8, an audacious leap beyond the cast iron blocks that powered most American muscle cars. The Winters Foundry in Ohio, best known for aerospace castings, supplied the raw alloy. Every block wore a unique casting number in the 3,946,053 series, a quiet signature of its rarity. Compared to the Iron L88, the ZL1's block shaved nearly 100 pounds off the nose of a car, dropping total engine weight to about 700 pounds. That single change transformed the Camaro's balance and acceleration. The heads and intake were aluminum too, with oversized ports and valves designed to gulp air at high RPM. Inside, a forged steel crank, solid lifter cam, and 11.5-to-1 compression pistons pushed the limits of street legality. On General Motors' dyno, the ZL1 was factory rated at 430 horsepower, but engineers and racers alike knew the real number was far higher. Period tests showed 500 to 550 horsepower, with torque peaking above 560 pound-feet. At full throttle, the engine could propel a stripped-down Camaro through the quarter mile in the low 11-second range, a figure that made insurance agents nervous and corporate lawyers uneasy. Every detail of the ZL1 screamed race car, from its Rochester quadrajet carburetor to the hand-finished ports. Yet on paper, it became a production option, an anomaly that existed only because the technology was ready, the racing rules demanded it, and one determined dealer was willing to force General Motors' hand. Fred Gibb ran his Chevrolet dealership in La Harpe, Illinois, with the mind of a racer and the eye of a loophole hunter. While most dealers stuck to the order sheets, Gibbs studied the fine print of General Motors' Central Office Production Order System, known as COPO, originally designed for police cars, taxis, and fleet buyers who needed something outside the regular catalog. In October 1968, Gibbs sat down with the COPO forms and filled out a request for 50 Camaros, each to be built with the new ZL1 all-aluminum 427 cubic inch engine. The code on the paperwork, COPO 9560, was meant for special equipment, not for sidestepping corporate policy. But the language was precise, and the system, by design, had no mechanism to reject a sufficiently detailed, properly formatted order from a franchise dealer. The order date, October 1968, locked General Motors into a legal obligation. The form, stamped and filed in La Harpe dealership records, triggered the clause that required Chevrolet to honor any COPO request that met the minimum production threshold. In this case, the number 50 was not arbitrary. The National Hot Rod Association rulebook demanded at least 50 identical, street-legal examples for a car to be eligible in superstock drag racing. Gibbs' order hit that mark exactly, making it impossible for Chevrolet to quietly ignore the request or brush it aside as a one-off experiment. COPO 9560 described the ZL1 package in bureaucratic detail, listing an all-aluminum 427 cubic inch engine, heavy-duty cooling, and a special rear axle. The order language made no mention of comfort, luxury, or daily driving. This was a car built for a stopwatch, not a commute. Once the paperwork reached the St. Louis assembly plant, it became a production directive. 50 cars, all configured to the same uncompromising specification, all destined for a single small-town dealer who had found a way to force the corporation's hand. The National Hot Rod Association's rulebook left no room for ambiguity. To compete in superstock, a car had to be a true production model, at least 50 identical street-legal examples, each available for public sale. This was not a suggestion. Section 5, Paragraph 3 of the 1969 NHRA rulebook spelled it out. 50 units, all built to the same configuration, all ready for the street. The rule was designed to prevent manufacturers from sneaking one-off specials onto the drag strip under the guise of factory production. It forced automakers to commit to real, documented builds, not just a handful of hand-tuned prototypes. For Fred Gibb, that number was everything. By requesting exactly 50 ZL1 Camaros through Chevrolet's Central Office Production Order System, he triggered the NHRA's legal lever. General Motors could not ignore the request or claim it was a fluke. The paperwork, filled out, stamped, and submitted by a franchised dealer, met the letter of the association's law. That single order forced Chevrolet to build a minimum run, even as corporate policy forbade the engine's existence in a midsize car. The NHRA's 50-unit rule became the wedge that split the gap between General Motors' public stance and its racing ambitions. With the order on file, the St. Louis assembly plant received a directive to build 50 ZL1 Camaros, each with the all-aluminum 427 heavy-duty cooling and race-ready hardware. There was no backing out. The cars had to exist, be street legal, and carry factory documentation. The association's rule, meant to ensure fair play, now locked General Motors into a production run it never intended. The result was a batch of cars that satisfied the sanctioning body's demands, but left Chevrolet's legal and marketing teams scrambling to manage the consequences. Sticker shock was not just a figure of speech on Fred Gibbs' lot. The ZL1 Camaro arrived with a window sticker close to $7,300, almost $2,000 more than a brand new Corvette. Customers balked. For that price, they got a bare-bones car with no radio, no air conditioning, and a warranty that came with a wink. By February 1969, General Motors executive minutes recorded the ZL1 as a problem to be contained, not celebrated. A memo from the legal department, 1112, offered dealers a $1,200 credit for every unsold ZL1 returned. Regional sales managers were ordered to halt further COPO ZL1 requests, and a dealer circular warned that selling these cars could expose dealers to liability. The message from headquarters was clear. This was not a product line. It was a corporate headache in aluminum and steel. Plant supervisors received orders to disguise the problem. 19 ZL1 Camaros were quietly repainted in standard colors and reassigned as if they carried ordinary powertrains. Meanwhile, performance data began to circulate. Factory slips showed quarter-mile times in the low 11-second range, faster than anything else with a warranty. As the dust settled, the official count stood at 69 ZL1 Camaros. Decades later, auction blocks would see these once unwanted cars bring over $1 million. Their rarity and raw speed transformed a corporate headache into collector gold. Today, General Motors' corporate caution is a footnote. The ZL1 stands as proof that bureaucracy can't always contain what it unleashes. What began as a mistake is now a 7-figure legend. Sometimes, history's rarest icons are born from the very loopholes meant to prevent them. What escapes control endures.